Howdy, howdy.
Why, hello.
And welcome to But It Was Aliens, the paranormal comedy podcast where we probe paranormal events to decide for the questionable benefit of humanity whether those events really were paranormal. My name is Kevin Legree, and alongside me is Mr. Granville Marshall Loon, the tuning fork. I'll be hosting this week's episode, which means that Granville has no idea what's coming up. And today, I'll be taking you to France, mon ami. 18th century France. Gai Paris. Paris! You looked like you had something really important to say there.
No, I don't.
And again, you've kept me waiting that time by making an utterance, suggesting you're about to say something.
I mean, no.
Okay, let us continue.
But before we do that, you
Yeah.
can continue.
It's going to be one of those days, is it? Right. We begin today's true tale in 1772 in the countryside surrounding Lyon in France.
Iron
A young boy
in Zion.
was born. Well, a very young boy because he'd just been born. I'm not sure if it was a full moon or if there was a meteor shower as this birth was birthed. Birth was birthed. Birth was birthed. There are many rumours I've started, but some sort of event had struck this night. It was immediately obvious that there was something unusual about this boy, for when the boy lay in his cot at night, come morning, anything that had been laying in the cot with the boy was either destroyed or had disappeared completely. The boy was named Tarrare. Tarrare may have been taken from the phrase bonbon Tarrare, a phrase used to describe explosions in 18th century France, but we can't be sure. But what we can be sure about is that there was something unusual about Tarrare.
Was the name Tarrare taken from the phrase bonbon Tarrare, or was the phrase bonbon Tarrare named after Tarrare?
So you're suggesting they named explosions after Tarrare. What's your reasoning?
Maybe he blew shit up.
How? Baby in a cot,
I don't mean as a baby,
Explosion.
I mean when he's older.
but he was named as a baby
But was the phrase bonbon Tarrare already
around
out
at the
before
point when
then?
he was born, yes.
Time travel then.
I can't begin to fathom how you got to that point.
He went back in time and blew shit up, and therefore the phrase bonbon Tarrare was coined.
Ah, and then he was named Tarrare
As he
to
should have
fulfill
been.
a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yes.
During this time, France was in the transition from chamber pots to flushing toilets, and it quickly became apparent, if not from nappy changes, then from the pan once Tarrare begun using the toilet, what was happening. The child was consuming everything.
Ooh.
Little gloves on at bedtime? Eaten. Blanket? Eaten. Even part of the cot would be gobbled up. One time a cat strayed too close. Gobble, gobble, my friends. Gobble, gobble. As a young boy, this kid could consume his own body weight in cow meat within a 24-hour period. Imagine eating your own body weight in a day. The hunger was insatiable, and as you can imagine, by the time the child hit his teens, Tarrare's family could no longer afford to keep him. Tarrare just cost too much to feed, for he was always hungry. An added complication was that the neighbours feared him. Tarrare was out on his own. Our boy begun wandering the lands of France, begging for food. Needing more food than he could possibly afford, and with an interesting condition, our subject soon himself became subject to a snake oil salesman. With a condition like this, Tarrare was catching eyes. The gentleman snake oil salesman took Tarrare under his wing to an extent and taught Tarrare the art of acting for the public, the art of putting on a show. Tarrare would eat unusual substances before the snake oil salesman would come out and cure Tarrare with his wares. Tarrare wasn't long for the con artist world though, because Tarrare would soon take these showman's skills and head for Paris to take on a new career as a solo act.
Ooh. So, the first time that he was eating these things in his cot...
Going back to his baby chair.
Yeah.
Yep.
Was he conscious whilst eating them, or just eating them whilst unconscious?
That's a good question. I suppose we don't know, because people weren't watching him all through the night. They just come down in the morning, Tarrare still sat there, and it's just like destruction all around this child.
Either there is something not wrong with his brain, but something not connecting his brain to tell his body that it's satiated. Therefore, well, was he always hungry, or could he just eat loads?
Both.
Because if he's always hungry, then something in his brain isn't telling him that he's full. Doesn't have that like safety switch. And
is he the first mutant? Was this the first X-Man?
I was going to say, what if, like Kirby, like portals inside of him? What's the film where, I can't remember. I don't know if it's something eats them or sucks them up and then they end up in a completely different world.
I've got no idea where you're going with this one.
I can't remember the film.
Is it recent?
After, I think it's 2010s onward.
I don't feel like I've seen that film.
Fair enough. But either way, it is like there's a portal within
so you're
whatever they're
Tarrare might have some sort of wormhole inside his tum-tum.
Unless he is eating things that get pooped out the other end, and we can, not we, but you could definitely be able to tell what he's eaten. Then,
well, that's what I said. Yeah,
he's about to. He's a human portal gun.
As I did say in the earlier section, they realised what was going on.
Oh yeah, true, you did.
But
that was when he was a baby.
No, not quite.
Is he just eating anything because he's hungry, or because he can eat anything?
Chicken and egg, I guess. If you were eating because you can, then your appetite is going to adapt to what you're doing with time, and so you'll start being hungry. If
you had the ability to eat anything, would you?
Without it harming me?
Yeah.
Oh, I'd go to town. I'd eat all my neighbours' houses.
Just start munching brick.
This is my land now. If they got a problem with that, I'll eat them.
The boy who ate bricks.
The boy who ate too much. I'm just trying to figure if there's anything that I would go out of my way to eat other than my local surroundings to live a life of isolation.
To be isolated, or just to be an annoyance?
Isolated. What about, like, the royal palaces? Get them off the map. Save a bit of money on the taxpayers.
Take you a while to eat.
Not if I could eat anything.
Still got to pass it out the other end.
You didn't say that. You said, or in fact I questioned and you confirmed that we could eat anything without taking any damage.
I mean, it's not going to take damage, but it's still got to pass
surely if it's going to pass out, it's going to damage part of me. So, Tarrare, showman, solo act. Where there is reward, there is usually risk, and this was the case for Tarrare and his unique guzzling abilities. Tarrare begun putting more and more unusual things down his gullet for his street show, and during one performance, Tarrare actually collapsed and had to be carried by the audience to the Hotel Dieu hospital. It was found that Tarrare had an intestinal obstruction and laxatives were prescribed. You can only imagine the mess.
Good Lord.
After recovering, Tarrare offered to demonstrate his skills to a doctor by swallowing his pocket watch. The surgeon agreed, but only on the basis that the surgeon could cut Tarrare open to retrieve the watch. Tarrare thought about it, but declined. And ate the surgeon's watch anyway because his tummy had the rumblies. I'm just going to add at this point that we have lots of accounts of Tarrare, including official published doctor's memoirs. This is all completely real. During the French War of the First Coalition in 1792, respected military surgeon Dr. Pierre-François Percy was first introduced to Tarrare. Tarrare at this point was barely 20 years of age and had somehow become a soldier in the French Revolutionary Army. This may or may not have been because Tarrare believed that he could be fed all that he required via army rations. Smart.
Not how it works, dear boy.
They got to keep the army going. I think there's logic in that.
Yeah, but they don't necessarily really have to keep him going. Did you get confused with Dr. Pierre-François because Percy just doesn't...
No, dramatic effect. I thought Pierre-François sounds really French, and then Percy doesn't.
Yeah, that's what I thought you got thrown off by. You were like, Dr. Pierre-François Percy?
To be fair, I haven't checked the pronunciation of his name. It could
Percy.
be Pierre-Francois. Percy, yeah. Or Perky.
What did the doctor do about his watch?
Well, he weren't going in there without permission. That'd be manslaughter, potentially.
Also, I'm surprised they didn't operate. I suppose if they think the obstruction can be passed with laxatives, they'll do that, won't they? Rather than perform surgery.
Let's keep this one suitable for families. If the blockage could be passed with a massive shit, then they're going to encourage that.
Yeah. Plus, I suppose at that point, they don't know what it is. Like, if he was eating something...
Yeah, they got to try.
Like a brick
I was going to say a bike. Handles. They hear a
pebble
ring.
or something. They just might think it's a mass of food that has got stuck.
And then if that don't work, they move on to more invasive procedures, interventions.
So... with him eating as much as he did, do we know how big he was?
He's gradually getting bigger, it would be fair to say.
I mean...
I may get into that later, but not at this point.
Okay.
But yeah, just imagine he's eating more and more clearly as we've gone on already.
Oh, he must be fit enough to get into the army, so he can't be like...
Okay.
26, 27 stone. But...
yeah, let's go with that thought then. How is this working? He's eating absolutely loads, yet he's fit enough to be in the army. How could that happen?
Must be quite active at the moment then. Or he's eating anything that he can, but not in massive amounts. So a stone he might be eating for the show, but then only having something small afterwards. Therefore,
I suppose, yeah.
And plus... there's no calories in stone.
But then that's still got to go in his tummy, isn't it? So his tummy is going to have to accommodate for that.
Mm-hmm. But then he might feel so bloated by it that he doesn't eat later.
Maybe
he passes it.
Maybe he is an X-Man. He like runs on stone like a Pokemon. It's Geodude. Tarrare was introduced to Dr. Pierre-François Percy because Tarrare could not survive on military rations alone. This was an unusual infliction, and so Tarrare would soon be studied by the good doctor. Tarrare had begun by doing little jobs for other soldiers in exchange for their rations, but even this was not enough, and so Tarrare begun foraging for remains in poop piles.
Oh.
Yep. The man picked through shit and it still wasn't enough. Tarrare became exhausted and starved and was admitted to the care of Dr. Percy. Tarrare was granted quadruple rations, but this still was not enough. Tarrare was quickly stealing the food of other patients and going through the bins for scraps. Tarrare even begun eating the bandage supply. Psychological examination was undertaken, but Tarrare was found to be completely sane. While sound of mind, Tarrare was not sound of body. Tarrare's eyes were permanently bloodshot, and Tarrare was constantly overheating, hot and sweaty to the touch. Tarrare could also be smelt from 20 feet away. The man ponged, and you knew when he was coming. Remember, this was the 1700s. Everyone stunk to some degree, so Tarrare must have really ponged. Dr. Percy described that Tarrare smelt so bad that he literally had visible stink lines, and it was at its worst when Tarrare had eaten.
Do you reckon those visible stink lines were heat? Like he was giving off that much heat? Like when you look at a road
Yeah, I'm with you.
in the summer, it was like that.
So he's got like a combustion engine. This man is a vehicle. We've cracked it. Got like a coal engine inside him and it's all just burning.
I mean, eating it's got to a point now where it's not an addiction, but not being satiated is driving him crazy almost. Like he is completely sane,
but he's got a desire that can't be fulfilled.
Yeah.
His tummy's got the rumblies.
Do you want to know who he reminds me of?
Who?
Captain Barbossa.
Ah, he's been cursed.
Yeah.
He's been cursed.
He can eat, he can drink all he wants. But I'll never taste any of it. And he's constantly looking for that. That feeling of fullness is very similar to what the pirates wanted with the taste.
We are in the 1700s. Maybe Tarrare's pappy or his grandpappy were a pirate.
A whole bushel of apples.
Part of a crew that were cursed that inspired the tale of Jack. Dr. Percy begun testing Tarrare. Percy prepared 15 full meals to see whether Tarrare had limits, and Tarrare kirbyed those bad boys straight down. Tarrare would pass out after eating, but the man never turned down a meal. Next, Doc Percy tried live animals. Percy gave Tarrare a cat, and yup, Tarrare ate it. Tarrare drank the blood and then guzzled the whole thing down before coughing up a fur ball of all the cat's fur. Next up, Tarrare gobbled down a lizard or three, a bunch of snakes, some puppies, and a massive eel. Tarrare guzzled them all. Gobble, gobble. After months of examination and of being uncertain how to utilise Tarrare's skills, the military came up with an idea. It was decided that Tarrare would make the perfect spy for the French army of the Rhine.
Okay, so lizard, snakes, eels. I get cats and puppies. And why would you start with the cat?
Maybe it's the closest animal.
You start small.
Like start with a fly.
Oh yeah, well.
And then a spider. Then a bird. Then a cat, then a dog.
Does that thing that Paul does in the film Paul, where he brings the bird back to life and then just munches it.
Yeah.
That's how he eats the bird.
It does.
Birdie.
This does sound like a cartoon character though, doesn't it? Just proper like wolf and things in one go, stink lines. Yet this is all completely legitimate. How do you think what do you think his role will be as a spy?
He probably sent places as an attraction and to get as much information whilst he's there, because he doesn't look like what your typical spy or soldier would look like. However, the stench might stop him being able to.
He's not going to sneak in, is he? He's going to have to come in noticed.
I don't think he's there to sneak, though. I think he's there, like they send him in to, I don't know, let's just say, for example, Buckingham Palace. And then he's there to perform, eat whatever, but take in information of who's there, if any of them move funny, how many doors are there to the main room, etc. That kind of stuff. I think that's where his spy skills would come in.
Do you not worry that he could be turned for food?
The observer. I mean, no, I don't. Because they don't know he's a spy.
So he'll just eat their food and they'll think nothing of it. They just got a really greedy. What do you think he looks like?
At this point, when he's a spy?
Yeah.
Do we know how tall he is?
I think he's kind of average height for the time. I don't recall him being too large or too small.
I'd say he's 7 foot high, 5 foot wide, and 7 feet tall.
What? Son of a gun.
No, I reckon he looks like your typical big boy wrestler, but twice the size. Mm-hmm. So picture Otis.
Right, yep.
But bigger. Or your typical rugby player that continues to eat the same diet without any of the exercise whatsoever. But one of your big
boys.
Yeah.
Tarrare's first task as 00 Hungry was to carry a pretend sensitive document to a target. How would Tarrare conceal such a document? You guessed it. Tarrare would guzzle the document whole, contained safely within a wooden box Tarrare would later pass. Tarrare was used to passing massive meals, so the box would come out unscathed, and with the state of this man's butt produce, nobody was detecting that. Upon arrival at his destination during the practice run, having carried out the task, Tarrare was paid with 30 pounds of bull organs presented in a wheelbarrow, which Tarrare immediately gobbled down in front of disgusted generals. Tarrare would soon be tasked with delivering a document behind enemy lines to a prisoner of war in Prussia, today Germany, Poland and Russia. This document was a dud. This was, unbeknownst to Tarrare, to be a live final practice run with real risk. The only issue with this plan was that Tarrare stank. People were going to notice this man. Tarrare also did not speak German, so he stood out in a number of ways. Tarrare was quickly captured, whereby Tarrare was whipped, beaten, and tormented before being returned to France when it was decided that he was useless. Tarrare returned to the care of Doc Percy, whereby it was established that Tarrare had experienced such trauma that he could no longer continue his military career. Tarrare needed a cure.
Poor bastard.
Mm-hmm.
It's like sending someone to war with a knife.
To a modern war with a knife.
And then not telling them who the enemies are. It's like there's 7 people in that room. One of them is the enemy. They all have guns. You have a pocket knife.
And a deck of cards.
That's it. Find the enemy and kill them. Go.
I think there is an issue around Tarrare's capacity to consent. Like, this man is so hungry that he will agree to anything, and I don't know that he's actually weighing up what he's agreeing to.
Just wants the food.
Just wants the food and doesn't really necessarily understand.
Oh, imagine being the one that had to search for that box.
Would you do it?
Out.
If you were in the army and it was that or dishonourably discharged or worse?
What's worse?
Wow, deserters in the olden times could have potentially been killed, I guess.
Shoot me.
I'm going through the poo. I want to live. Give me some gloves and I'm good.
Just think if you could smell him from like so far away.
Give me a mask and I'm good.
Nope, you've just got to go in bare hands.
Oh,
no mask.
And you get it under your nails. Ugh. Oh, grim.
It's going to be there for weeks.
It's like the size of a horse.
Because you're not going to be able to take a bath or a shower.
Oh, they're harder to come by back in these times.
Exactly.
And I can imagine if Tarrare ever got in a bath or shower, as he got in, everyone else would get out.
So
the water would immediately turn like dark brown.
You sure you still want to live?
I want to live. Life is valuable, my friend.
You got to put your hands under as it comes out. You still want to live?
I'll put a note on your gravestone saying didn't do shit.
I have to live.
Potential cures were explored, including Tarrare consuming at different times wine vinegar, a diet of only soft-boiled eggs, tobacco peels, and laudanum opiates, a depressive drug. None worked. Tarrare was left fighting animals for stray food and drinking the blood of patients at the hospital treated via bloodletting, removing people's blood. Tarrare was even caught on occasion eating dead bodies from the hospital morgue.
Oh.
It wasn't long before a toddler went missing at the hospital. The prime suspect? Tarrare. Tarrare was chased from the hospital without so much as a trial and disappeared into the city. 4 years passed without Percy hearing a single mention of Tarrare. Tarrare was gone.
So no proof that that 4-year-old...
No proof. The 4-year-old just vanished. And we know that Tarrare eats anything.
I reckon someone fucked up or that kid was kidnapped and they just blamed Tarrare.
Perfect excuse.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, throughout this one, Tarrare will do anything for food, and we acknowledge that, but equally, there's not been anything to suggest that he would harm another human. That's not to say that he doesn't get really hungry and hunger gets the best of him, though, so it's a difficult one to form an opinion on.
So he's a human personification of glutton.
He is the actual sin.
Yeah.
He is the sin. He's not the personification of. He is.
He is.
Yeah.
We had witnessed.
The 7 sins are all actually just presences on the world.
Trying to think what the other ones are and who they could relate to within the world currently, or at some period of time, like to this extent.
Anger, pride. Yeah, we need to give that some serious thought. That's not an on-the-spot question. Pulling up Google to check what the 7 deadly sins are.
Lust.
Rasputin. In 1798, Doc Percy received a call from a physician at Versailles Hospital. The physician had a patient on their deathbed who was requesting to speak to Percy. Can you guess who the patient was? Yep, it was Tarrare. Tarrare was around 26 years of age and had lived quite the life in his short time. Now, Tarrare was back. What do you think was the cause of Tarrare's upcoming passing? Tarrare confessed to eating a golden fork in 1796, and this fork was now lodged in Tarrare's stomach. Tarrare had requested Doc Percy's contact because he hoped that Percy could remove the fork and save Tarrare's life. Unfortunately for Tarrare, it wasn't actually the golden fork. Tarrare had final stage tuberculosis, and less than a month later, Tarrare had passed. His whole life, Tarrare had never weighed more than 100 pounds, but had a stretchy gut he could wrap around himself in life like a belt. Super gut.
What?
Yep, wrap it around himself. Told you, X-Man.
Wow.
This man was the very definition of skinny fat.
Wow.
Can you think of a more useless superpower than stretchy gut?
Depends. If you make a good spy.
Which he didn't.
No, he didn't. But the whole time he was trying to fill that gut.
Mm-hmm.
My brain's gone to
I
mush.
feel like stretchy gut has blown your mind.
It has.
The race was now on to examine Tarrare's corpse and find out what the shit had been going on. Surgeons of Assays refused to cooperate with one keen doctor, but eventually an autopsy was undertaken. Tarrare was found to have an extremely wide esophagus, aka food pipe, aka gullet. Observers could see straight down Tarrare's throat into his stomach. That stomach was huge and lined with ulcers. Tarrare's body in general was absolutely full of pus with an oversized liver and gallbladder. They never found that gold fork. Today, we still don't have a definite scientific explanation for what Tarrare was. It's possible that the bit of the mind that controls appetite and feelings of being full was damaged. The hypothalamus regulates body temperature and causes the sensation of hunger, so it's likely that Tarrare's was oversized. Due to the continual gobbling of raw food, it's likely Tarrare also had intestinal parasites which kept his weight down. This could have further combined with hyperthyroidism in the most severe case of these symptoms combined known to humankind. Prader-Willi syndrome also causes constant hunger. This all happened during the French Revolution, so there could have been a nutritional deficiency at birth that contributed to this brutal affliction to never be satisfied. Another possibility is that some of the documentation around Tarrare has been exaggerated, but to be transparent, Doc Percy was chief surgeon to the French military. Dr. Percy's account was considered reputable and was included in the London Medical and Physical Journal alongside several other reputable publications. This wasn't bullshit. A chap named Charles Domery had the same, albeit less severe symptoms at the same time in the same place.
I get having all of the things that would cause the hunger.
Yep.
But was it quite rare for someone to have an extremely wide esophagus?
This wide, yeah.
Like, how wide is considered rare? And
Wide enough to swallow a cat.
did he dislocate his jaw like a snake? Like,
Maybe he chowed it down to eel size and then just straight down like that cartoon character.
because I get that his gullet is
Wide. Yeah.
so you could probably just, like you said, and it went straight to his stomach. You could see straight down, so anything would just go down it. However, how is he getting his mouth wide enough to do what it's doing? But anyway, I
Mouths are
digress.
stretchy.
I digress.
I bet you could fit more in yours than you think.
Did anybody else have a gullet this wide?
Not that I found.
I was going to say, but then did they not have the symptoms that he had? Therefore, it's down to the fact that he had all of those symptoms. That's why he was able to do what he did.
So I mentioned there was one other person at this time with similar, albeit not as extreme symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't completely unheard of, but it is incredibly rare, and Tarrare was next level. I haven't seen any accounts of the other folks with similar symptoms having quite the dimensions of Tarrare.
So he's an outlier.
He's top of the pile.
Gullet King.
Do you reckon he was indeed gluttony, as we said earlier, and everywhere he goes, that is being spread to others, and he maybe came into contact with Charles Domery at some point?
Turned him.
Or Domery. Turned him, yes.
Made him his sub. I was going to say, or he sired him.
He sired him like a vampire. Oh, that's interesting. Because I've given you the story. I've given you the science. Now, I give you the truth. Was Tarrare a ghoul? Tombs-esque monster? Or indeed, some kind of blood-guzzling vampire? This creature had a mouth that could stretch to fit a dozen apples in it at once. The tummy could stretch and wrap around himself. That isn't traditional human ability. Was Tarrare one of the first X-Men? Does Tarrare appear every 300 odd years to consume what he needs to then hibernate and once again return? I'm just going to show Mr. Moonwalker some pictures of Tarrare as we get ready to summarise. There you go, Mr. Moonwalker.
Okay. One shows him putting a whole cat in his mouth. And these are sketched drawings, by the way.
Yep.
And the other just shows him picking up a mouse and looking at it like he's about to eat it. Like Scar in Lion King.
I guess what I'm trying to put across here is that all the artwork and descriptions of this chap have him as a generally average-sized person, just with a massive food pipe and stretchy tum-tum.
Yeah, his neck doesn't seem abnormal.
And we just got one more for you to check out there.
That looks Tim Burton-esque.
Yeah.
So we've got another picture of Tarrare sitting here looking very gaunt and deathly. His fingers are all skin and bone. You can see his cheekbones protruding in his face. His chest is very thin and wiry. And he has a beer gut.
That's not actually full, that's just skin. Layers and layers of skin that can swing around.
Keep his midriff warm.
I suppose that's one use for it. I said earlier on about it being a useless superpower, didn't I? You can keep yourself warm. That's about the only real tangible benefit of this power.
Could slap somebody with it. It's a weapon.
It's probably going to take longer to carry out the physical act of picking up your gut and pulling it back to then slap. It'd be more of an insult thing than a useful fighting ability, like a glove slap. The ultimate diss.
Still funny.
In summary, we've met Tarrare, the French eating wonder. Tarrare was born outside Lyon in 1772 with an insatiable appetite which, as is often the case with insatiable appetites, was never quenched. Tarrare was consuming his own body weight in beef within a 24-hour period by the time this kid was about 4 years old. By his teens, Tarrare cost too much to keep and so his family turfed him out. Tarrare was taken in by a snake oil salesman for a while before heading out on his own to the streets of Paris. Tarrare ended up in the French Revolutionary Army, whereby he came to the attention of Dr. Pierre-Francois Percy, because the man was hungry. It was found that Tarrare did not have any psychological difficulties, but Tarrare's eyes were permanently bloodshot and the man was continually overheating. Tarrare ponged. The military tested Tarrare and found that he had no limits. Tarrare could eat 15 meals a day easily, and Tarrare happily gobbled live animals. Whilst Tarrare had shown that he would do anything for food, the French military decided that Tarrare would make a good spy. Tarrare was captured pretty quickly because he stuck out in a crowd in smell and in not speaking the language he should. After being tortured, Tarrare was a mess and could no longer fulfill duties and so lived at the military hospital in hope of a cure. Eventually, a toddler went missing at the hospital and Tarrare was accused by an angry mob. Tarrare ran. 4 years later, Dr. Percy received a call from another doctor with Tarrare on his deathbed at the Versailles Hospital. Tarrare actually died of tuberculosis. We theorised as to whether Tarrare was actually a monster or demon with somewhat red eyes, or whether Tarrare was a sad combination of malnourishment at birth with an oversized hypothalamus making him hot and hungry. That is today's probe. Have you taken all details within this true tale in?
I have indeed.
Are you
Swallowed them.
guzzled them, in fact? Are you saying that it was, well, paranormal in any way, I guess? Was he a ghoul? Was he a mutant? Was he the first mutant?
He was glutton himself.
Was he sin? Was he wrath? No, he wasn't
He
wrath.
wasn't Wrath. He just decided he was glutton. No, I do not believe this is paranormal.
Boo! See, I would argue that it's not normal. Ergo, it is paranormal.
I did think that at first and was going to say it, but then I was like, nah. This is not paranormal. Unfortunately, I think he did have those symptoms that you mentioned, and along with the parasites, if he's just eating raw meat and it's not fully digesting one of those, or many of those parasites just live within his body now and are partly eating food that is going through him and maybe also eating him.
So you're saying it was wormies?
It was wormies. Wormsies.
Wow. Well, I'm saying that this one is among the madder tales we've covered, and it's all completely true. The man who ate too much. I guess there has to be some kind of psychological or physiological condition involved here, but regardless, this one has actually blown my mind as I've researched it. Even if it's due to an oversized part of the brain, that's still not normal, is it? So in my opinion, as I said, we have to actually come down on the conclusion that this one is indeed paranormal. There's no other option for the logical mind. Now, am I saying that Tarrare was a monster? I guess that's kind of hard to stand by, but Tarrare may have had a gene mutation, so I put it to you, dear probers and Mr. Moonwalker. Was Tarrare not an X-person? A mutant? Was he not? Was he not? Was he not?
No.
Why?
He was a man with
How
a
could you
big
say
gullet.
this one is normal?
I'm not saying it's normal, but I'm saying it's abnormal enough to fall into the realms of mutant or paranormal. So, boo you, bitch.
Any final thoughts, Mr. Moonwalker?
No.
Well, that be a wrap for today, that do. Thank you for listening to us. If you would be at all interested in supporting the show and hearing a little more, each month we release bonus episodes at patreon.com/butitwasaliens. Basically, we undertake side probes into paranormal events too strange and unusual for the general public to hear. You can gain access to these episodes for quite literally less than a cup of coffee. You can share episode suggestions with us on the X Twitter at @ButItWasAliens. You could also say hello on Facebook, where Connected to But It Was Aliens is a secretly public private group available to many and most, but also everyone, called Extraterrestrial Towers! Being a member of Extraterrestrial Towers grants you protection from the aliens when they invade. It does. It really does. Ignore the shiny vibrating devices. We honestly don't know how they got there. That is it for this episode. So until next time, are crayons edible?
Yes.
If you eat them. The truth is up there. #PRO